You know, we use money in many different ways, and today is one of those times in which God commands us to not appear before Him empty. To that end, some of us have been preparing for our holy day offerings to God for perhaps quite a while. Some of you may remember Mr. Rene Messier speaking about how he takes and recommends taking something out each month and preparing your holy day offerings in that way. And certainly that I completely concur with. That is an excellent method, but one of many, of course. And then there are others who may not have prepared until the last moment. Now, writing out your check at the last moment is not, dawdling around. It's, you make a decision, and then by the time you write out your check, you've come to that point of what you want to give. Beyond the offering we give, have you ever considered what goes with the offering? And that is what I will address in this sermonette this afternoon. I'll give you 4 points to kind of lock this in, help us understand the importance of this time that we are setting aside a moment to respond to God in a unique and personal way. Number 1, we are responding to God's command when we give an offering. But most importantly, think about this. We are actually obeying God. If I have time, I'll quote what God says about those who don't obey Him and try to make offerings. But I want to go to Deuteronomy 16 and read verses 16 through 17, as we do during these holy day times, to be reminded over and over again so we can really get it down and not forget what God has commanded. Deuteronomy 16 and verse 16, 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God in the place which He chooses. And that's a general presentation of the holy days, but if you go to Leviticus 23, of course, there's more to it, and other places in the Bible as the holy days are revealed. A little here and a little there. At the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and at the Feast of Tabernacles, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord your God, which He has given you. So if God has richly blessed us, we should then richly return the favor and bless God. But whether large or small, we are to do it as we are able. So that means we've got to think about it a little. We don't go off the deep end and do what we can't afford. Excuse me. We are making our offerings personal by the amount of attention we pay to this duty God has placed upon us. Planning is important. That should go along with the offering that we're bringing today. We know that offerings occur throughout the year on God's holy days, but again, under this first point of responding, be prepared. Factor offerings in for each holy day and make it more than just a calendar event. It's important to soberly, whether it's large or small, whether it's our teenagers or your younger people giving 50 cents, $1, $5, or whatever money they bring to the opportunity to give to God. It involves all of these steps that I'll be presenting today. Planning, not the last minute. I think I have a quarter here somewhere, but learn to set it aside even days before the holy day arrives. It will become more special to each one of us if we do that. Number 2, focus on giving to God. That's what we're doing. 1 Chronicles 29 is a short review of a time when David was preparing for the building of the temple, which Solomon would complete. But he offered over and above everything that he could possibly come up with, it sounds, if you read the whole chapter and for context. But in verse 9, all the people were enlisted in the giving, and then the people rejoiced, for they had offered willingly, because with a loyal heart they had offered willingly to the Lord. And King David also rejoiced greatly. It was a gift to God, and that's what we're doing today. I mean, God didn't come down and suddenly take it out of the hands of the people or of David, but he noted it, and now it's recorded for all of history, all of time, what they did. Number 3, rejoicing should be a part of our giving. Paul pretty much lines this out on the approach we should be using. 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 and 7. He writes, "But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully." It's like the more you give, the more you get. It's kind of a shorthand version of what is being said here, especially when you tie it into God. Verse 7, "So let each one give as he purposes in his heart." Notice how personal this is. And that the fact that it takes decision-making and effort on our part. Continuing down in the verse, "Not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver." Rejoicing in the fact that we can even do this and add to. Number 4, bring faith with your offering. Do it with faith. The 2 Corinthians 9 and verse 8, a couple of scriptures here to kind of show the approach. Because this is interactive, we give to God, he blesses us brimful and running over if we do it. If we bring to God with our offering an attitude of total willingness and joy. 2 Corinthians 9 and verse 8, "And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work." In other words, God will take care of our needs. Luke 6 and verse 38. Luke 6 and verse 38. "Give, and it will be given to you." These are the words of Jesus Christ. "Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use," not a little tiny little cup, but it's with the same measure, it would be measured back to you. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, where this, like it's more happened to me more in times of when I just send in my offering, that maybe I add something and I have to think twice about it. No, I'm going to anyway. I've had so many times, well enough to make it noteworthy in my life, where suddenly, a day later, 3 days later, suddenly that all comes back to me unexpectedly in the kind of business that I'm in, where there's an abundant blessing that I I wonder, I bet I wouldn't have gotten that if I hadn't just been a little more willing to commit to God in the matter. Our offerings, brethren, help us to fully participate in God's holy days. These offerings are a vital part of it. It's not just hearing the sermon, it's not our own Bible study, but our offerings. And I tried to make the point that a lot goes with this if we are conscious of it. There are more points that could be brought out, but for the purposes of this offertory, I think that's enough. But I want to end with pointing out how unique we are in the fact that God accepts our offerings. People make offerings to God all the time, and all the time He is not accepting them. In Amos, chapter 5 and verse 21, I'm going to read this and conclude, and we will have some music once the offering is taken up here shortly. God says this, I despise your feast days, not the one we're keeping, and I do not savor your sacred assemblies. Though you offer me burnt offerings and your grain offerings, I will not accept them, nor will I regard your fatted peace offerings. Take away from me the noise of your songs, for I will not hear the melody of your stringed instruments. But let justice run down like water, and righteousness like a mighty stream. Brethren, let's count our blessings that God is pleased with what we are bringing to Him now, because we're doing it out of the dedication of obedience and the love of God that allows us to be called His children at this time. So let's rejoice in what we're about to do and think about it in the next feast days and maybe add a little dimension to how we approach God. So